half of its portfolio relates to health. Um, we also do a lot of work which is relating to socially relevant technologies and enterprises. We are also a center of Sparsh Center for BIRAC. We do mentor a lot of fellows in social innovation, different teams including health, agro, sanitation and hygiene, the elderly, and some environment. Okay, so that's a brief introduction. Be happy to discuss more at a later stage. Please go ahead. Srini, you can.
Srini, you're on mute.
Yes. Thank you, Prerna. Sucharita, could you introduce yourself?
Thank you, Srini, and great to be with you guys and all the very accomplished participants who are with us today. I have more than 2 decades of experience of working with women in different ways, in the development sector, health, communication, technology, impact, creating livelihoods, etc. But in the last 3 years, I have been on enabling women to set up their own enterprises as entrepreneurs, both for-profit and social enterprises. So that's the focus I'm in, and it's really exciting because I think women-led startups are probably the fastest growing, at least before COVID, the fastest growing in the country. Yes.
Thank you, Sucharita. Hoping to hear more from you. Shrikant.
Hi. So my journey has been, I started off life as a serial entrepreneur, then became a mentor and angel investor to startups. And a few years ago, I got involved with a whole range of incubators. I'm on the board of some of them, including Dr. Premnath's Venture Center. I'm the chairman of the board at the IIM Calcutta Innovation Park, and I'm on the board of the IIT Kanpur Incubator. Besides that, I'm involved with many efforts to spread incubation in tier 2, tier 3 towns across the country, ranging from Ahmedabad to the Northeast to Ladakh. So it's been a fascinating journey and perspective in the incubation world.
Awesome. Thank you, Karthik.
Hi everyone, I'm Karthik Chandrasekhar. I actually run Incubator called AIC Sangam, which is part of the Atal Innovation Mission's focus on setting up incubators across India. We come from a focus on supporting science and technology startups through commercialization, with a specific focus on looking at startups that are working on tackling climate change. So our main sectors that we focus on are access to energy, looking at agriculture from a climate resilience perspective, as well as water conservation. So those are our 3 main sectors, and then anything to do with resource productivity is something we look strongly at.
Thank you, Karthik. Salim, could you introduce yourself?
Hi everybody, good evening. I'm a part of CICO. CICO is I'm Ahmedabad's technology business incubator. Our heart is where entrepreneurs are. Our focus is on technologies and its relevant applications. The difficult sectors or the areas of market failures gives us a kick. And what I do at CII is I am its chief salesman. I also work with startups to try and help them with their fundraise, and of course the fundraise for the center itself.
Thank you, Salim. Okay, I think what we have today are folks who can bring in amazingly diverse perspectives, and that's going to be very important given the kind of audience that we have. And we are hoping that we can, there will be a clear takeaway for folks at the end of today's session. I'm going to jump right into the topic, wade right in and ask the question about how has it affected you, right? You as an incubator, what's happening, right, over the last 3 months? So, Premnath, Dr. Premnath, if you could start.
Sure. Okay. So if you look at it, I think the biggest single factor that probably has changed is just uncertainty. And uncertainty for us as incubators and uncertainty for startups. Um, I mean, we can go into details on what exactly has changed. Some things have gone in the positive direction, some things have gone in the negative direction. But you know, uncertainty is universal all across. And in any business, the moment uncertainty increases, you know, your return expectations increase. And that happens for not only that will happen not only for incubators but also startups. A typical investor would be perhaps more risk averse. The ones who want to take risk will have higher expectations. At the same time, the people who are supporting us as incubators are also going to have much higher expectations, and it is going to be probably quite competitive. For us at Venture Center, one of the things we, since we had a healthcare focus, we were able to actually be quite active all through the COVID crisis in some way or the other. There were at least 23 odd startups of ours who were contributing in some way to products needed during the outbreak, and continue to do so. So that includes from diagnostics to PPEs to devices and to various other products that people needed. They had to pivot. Some of them could reposition themselves, and that was good to see. But at the same time, several other sectors which people where people you know, had to stay idle were of course suffering. But in all cases, I think I'm not too negative or pessimistic about the situation. I think what's going to happen is that there is going to be considerable change. Not everything is predictable at this time, but some things definitely are. As far as incubators are concerned, you know, the core activities of advice and mentoring are definitely going to be relevant. There's no doubt about it. As far as funding goes, that too is going to be relevant. I think there will be some shake-up in if incubators are focusing exclusively on general infrastructure, co-working spaces, and so on. But if they were focusing on specialized infra, I don't think you know, people will still need those options, and I don't feel that there is going to be too much of an issue over there, including, you know, scientific facilities and so on. There's definitely going to be a shake-up on events. There's a lot that is going to change. People who were driving entirely through events would probably have feel the impact. But incubators are also very important peer-to-peer networks, and that I don't think will change. A lot of startups get together because they have a peer group to talk to, and I think that is going to be retained. Maybe, you know, we will progress a little slowly towards normalization, but that is going to happen. Incubators also provide a lot of branding, credibility, referrals, reputation, which I think is not going to change as much as well. The networks are not going to change as much as well. Business support services are not going to change as much as well. So I think my outlook is cautiously optimistic, in the sense that I think there is uncertainty, but there's nothing to panic out here. And that is my general first set of comments that I'll stop with. Srini, back to you.
Thank you, Dr. Premnath. That sounds more than cautiously optimistic. I'm hopeful of that too. I'm sure, Sucharita, with your focus on catalyzing women entrepreneurs and making the space more inclusive, how are you seeing it? What has changed or what has not changed?
Yeah, as you say, I work with this very focused group, which is women, and their needs and their priorities are somewhat a little different, even though they are entrepreneurs, no doubt. So even before the COVID crisis, what we saw was that their priority is less and less for physical infrastructure space and co-spaces. That is not what they look for from an incubator. And in fact, through this crisis, it's been an opportunity for us and our women entrepreneurs and incubatees, because more and more we and they have been pushed to deliver online and virtually. So, and this will be the new normal. I don't see that changing, because we see that women are very comfortable now doing things online, and for us to deliver virtually. Yes, we had to scramble a little bit because we were used to doing a lot more of the trainings as physical meetings, etc. But it's amazing how, quickly and resiliently the ecosystem evolves and responds to the situation. So it's been a time of change, but I see it in terms of incubation as probably a positive. And we've, moved from the monthly face-to-face meetings into support, training, peer learning on a virtual platform, which is working well. I'll stop here. I'm sure there'll be other things which will come up.
Oh, that's great to hear. Shrikant, you have the perspective of two different institutions at the same time.
So Dr. Premnath used the word cautiously conservative. I don't. Was that the phrase he used?
Optimistic.
Optimistic, and also Sucharita also bordered on saying I'm confident, but did not say it. So I'm going to actually take the plunge and saying we actually should see this as a good tipping point and look at it very, very positively. Partly maybe it's my background as an entrepreneur, and entrepreneurs always tend to be optimistic. But let me just talk about one survey I did. In the course of one of the many webinars I did with startups, I did a survey before the webinar, and 130 of these startup founders responded. These are all at the incubators I'm involved with. They're hurting, definitely. Cash flows, revenues, all of that. But they're brave, they're confident. 80% of them said, we are very confident or reasonably confident about the future, which to me was an eye-opener. So I probed further. One is that very clearly, a lot of them are pivoting, as Dr. Premnath said. They're not sitting back. And I'll give you 3 examples of interesting pivots. There is this car servicing startup, which has now pivoted to sanitizing cars and sanitizing offices and hospitals. They were even, in fact, invited by the governor of Meghalaya to sanitize the Raj Bhavan, for example. Then there is this travel and hospitality has been the worst hit sector. So a lot of these travel and hospitality startups which offer homestays or caravans are now saying, you know what, I'm going to sanitize it. I'm going to certify these places as being sanitized. So they're moving in a new direction. And the most dramatic one, which I'm deeply involved with, is a startup that was a robotic startup, has pivoted to create a high quality ventilator in a short period of time. So pivot is one part of their positive confidence. The second is they're open to ideas beyond pivots. They're open to ideas about what their focus should be in future. They're open to partnerships. They're open to collaboration. And therefore, to me, actually, they're thinking in the right direction. The onus is actually now on the incubators to think as forward as the startups are, to think of new ways to add value and think of completely different approaches. But I'll hold that for when we come back after this round of questions.
Great. Karthik?
Sure. And I think for us, when we look at our startups, sometimes it feels like nothing has changed, right? Like when you take the clean tech sector, and all kind of companies that are building infrastructure, hardware, R&D, they anyway were running on like fumes, 3 to 6 months of capital, being extremely frugal. So I think for us, welcome to our universe, right? So this is basically how most of the startups we work with operate, and that basically means that all of them are coming back and saying, "I'm so happy you told us to focus on our cash flows, make sure we are striking good deals. Collaboration has become extremely important." In our case, I think from an operational perspective, the ones that came to us the earliest were the ones who needed the infrastructure, which was incremental to just the typical co-working. So, I think my servers are now running at my home. We still haven't opened our incubators, so our servers are all running at my home. Um, and and the ones that keep coming in are the ones who want to ship products. So they come in for small periods of time and get out. But I think the focus now for everyone needs to be around additionality, on building something that has some level of resilience that's brought into the economy, right? So what the Prime Minister spoke about in terms of, hey, we need some basic level of competency, capabilities around manufacturing, R&D that we build up. I think that's there for companies quite a bit in the healthcare medtech sector from the past history. But I think we need to do that across the board, across the economy.
Great. I mean, it's interesting what clean tech, like you're saying, used to live on seems to be a normal. And I want to come back to that. But Salim, CI Co has been doing this for quite a while now. So what has...
Yeah, I mean, we derive a lot of our DNA and inspiration from IIM Ahmedabad. More difficult the situation, better we get. So, as the old adage of Israeli Air Force goes, difficult things will be done immediately and impossible things may take some time. So that's how we take the situation as. We look at it that, the multiplier effect that incubators have in terms of innovation. When I talk about innovations, I really mean what CICO's focus is specifically on game-changing innovations. For example, I was just talking to somebody about a small innovation which could be, a glass of juice, Minute Maid, but the amount of chain it affects the farmers and other well-being it does. And also a few years back, I had read a book which said, there's an innovation which is happening, medical innovation, and this could help us live for 160 years and feel like 45. And after all this, I'm just wondering, where that innovation is. So it said that by 2023 or so. So anyway, looking at this whole perspective, what we have decided is that, the three things that we work with entrepreneurs on the capacity, on the competencies and capital, we've tried to make sure that there's nothing short. Of course, our startups who are in the revenue stage are affected a bit, but we have been in touch with corporates, we've been in touch with other funding agencies, and we're trying to work to make this, hoping that this is just an ephemeral phase, will pass away in a few more weeks, and things will be back to same.
Thank you. What I noticed, and I was making copious notes as you were speaking, I noticed a thread across, okay? And I'm going to sort of provoke or probe a little further. I saw some level of specialization sharpening out here. I saw, in fact, the demand expectation from an incubator is actually rising. Like Dr. Premath, you mentioned, we are expected to do much better. The returns are going to be higher, while of course the risk is higher. I'm also seeing the same thing that Sucharita, you said about maybe the physical meeting is gone, but anyway the demand for infra was low. So I want to probe that piece about specialization in the sense that how are you now going to see incubation change given this, and this is literally a new reality. And I'm seeing across what you were talking about specific areas where you're seeing positives, where you're actually seeing more demand. you want to highlight those and see how you're going to use those going ahead?
In what sequence do you want us to answer?
Let me start with Dr. Premnath, because I think what he said triggered off a lot of thinking, and then a lot of, many of the thoughts got echoed, and I will call upon the next after that.
Yeah. See, I think broadly speaking, we did have a phase where a lot of incubators were getting created, a lot of startups were coming up, which I think will continue. From what I see, even the government departments are not necessarily slowing down their activity. Okay, so I'm not convinced that that is going to really slow down unless they see that there is a lack of performance in their view. Okay, that's where I see a risk, in the sense that I think the demand on funds is going to be pretty large, which means that they will have to be selective. So in that sense, the demands will be higher, shakedowns will happen. I mean, we can't help that. So people have to plan to be as productive as possible with minimum resources. So there's no doubt about it. Now, as far as the specialization part that you talked about, I think increasingly I feel that there is a need for the moment you start creating value for specific companies in certain sectors, the highest degree of value you will create will be when you have deep resources, deep networks in a specific domain, and that I think is going to be important as we go along. And this could, I don't mean only in terms of physical resources. It could even be your ability to help. Say in the current situation, one of the very important things incubators need to do is help startups raise money, right? And be able to for the pre-revenue guys, help them raise investments and grants, and for the post-revenue guys, help them manage their cash flows and help arrange working capital of some kind through this crisis, at least the phase that we are entering into, and for the next few months at least. So that will be also a specialization of a certain kind. People like us also who have specialized scientific facilities or capabilities to support people who are looking at medical devices, products, so on, will also be, I don't think there's going to be a reduction in demand. Now, as far as running all those activities sustainably is concerned, I think there is some uncertainty right now, but I'm not going to, I don't think it's going to be only negative, in the sense there's uncertainty about, say, government support. There's going to be uncertainty about investors and CSR support and corporate support. There's uncertainty also about revenues of startups which are going to fund services, I mean uptake of services from incubators. Okay, so that uncertainty is troublesome, but I think if we can manage through 3 months or so, I feel that it will be a lot clearer, hopefully one way or the other. So I think our incubators need to focus on trying to manage through the crisis especially, and I'm not too negative about the time period after the crisis. Okay, as of Shri, that's my comment right now. Maybe others can comment on.
Yeah, I'm just building on your train of thought, and I want to jump to Karthik, because I see the thread of domain expertise, and you used to run on fumes. At least the startup used to run on fumes earlier. And how are you seeing from your support? What is getting pulled in more? Where is the demand? And where do you think that will continue? Because that could be a clear area of learning or a takeaway for others who are also specializing like you.
Sure, I think the first part is pretty close to what Premnath spoke, right? And it's not generic advice, right? Again, even if you're talking about cash flows or customers or sales, you really need to understand the sector to kind of help a startup with figuring out those, right? Like, there are people who can give you generic advice or kind of help kind of from a CFO-ish kind of way, but what we are talking about is really understanding the business and being able to think both tactically and strategically, right? So that's one part of it. But I think it's more about being able to have some additionality in your thinking. So we help the startup differentiate itself, right? And that basically means organizations we build need to have the ability to both learn, teach, and share. And that's something that we have spent a lot of time doing, right? And that's the same with Wilgrow and quite a few other organizations in CIA who have been running acceleration programs and kind of getting into new sectors or building on expertise. And so every time we jump in, we kind of learn something new and want to kind of learn before we kind of help. Right? So currently we are just doing an acceleration program on just land acceleration, working around land degradation, and it's been a year-long deep dive, making sure we understand what we're doing. Right? So that's one level, which is basically around talent and the ability to learn, share, and teach. Right? The second is basically tools, and I think that's what also Premnath is alluding to in terms of product development tools, any kind of capabilities in terms of infrastructure beyond your seating and internet, right? And to us, I think in the last almost 75 days of people seeking to come to the office with all the dangers present has been mainly around trying to get access to that infrastructure. Nobody has called us and said, we all want to be together in an office so that we can have some meetings or just have more productivity. I think almost everybody we have talked to has said productivity has actually gone up. We talk more, we are more connected in terms of what everyone is doing. What we really need is a way to figure out infrastructure. So people coming to us going forward, we strongly believe are going to come for that incremental infrastructure. And that obviously we need to be selective, and that could work from a specialization perspective on what we want to provide support.
Got it. In fact, I'm building on both before I jump to Sucharita, which is about, when you said additionality, sector knowledge, specialized infra. And I picked up something when you said people believe they're more productive. And Sucharita, I think there was a thread that you mentioned there, new kinds of working beyond just a physical meeting, where people seem to be more purposeful. Is that how it is changing too? Is that what you're seeing?
Certainly, I think across the board, except for those who are in retail trading, feel that their productivity has not substantially gone down because of work from home and working remotely. And as far as we see, what we are working on very closely with our entrepreneurs is firstly to help them to re-strategize. Certainly, I would say that in our experience, demand has reduced, and in some sectors, it will probably take a year before it picks up. That's the reality. So helping them to re-strategize, to pivot, to create a business model canvas in keeping with that, to look at new opportunities. For example, just taking off from what Premnath said, we have a startup who has a patented cradle with sensors for babies, and they were planning to manufacture in China and launch in the US market. So all that has gone into the back burner. So they have pivoted, and they are now testing in hospitals, again, a ventilator which can be shared between two patients. So, this kind of, using the resources, the technology, the skills to help them re-strategize is what we see as a key role for us right now. And of course, support organizations and donors also have to think a little differently. We'll come to that a little later, but right now, for example, there is a need for bridge funding. Get people through these 6 months. Just before this call, I had a reach out from an entrepreneur who has got a contract to deliver in Oman, and she just needs cash flow to take her through it. So these are the very immediate needs that we are seeing, and we are trying to respond to.
Fabulous. So to Shrikant and Salim, I'm actually going to modify that question because I am seeing across a pattern of something unique coming up. There's almost a expectation for us as incubator actually rising. Which one do you want to, would you pick to see where we at an incubator can add the most value in this area? In this kind of for an entrepreneur, given the situation we are in. Because Dr. Prima spoke about specific aspects, so did Karthik, so did Sucharita, right? In your perspective, where do you think we can really add value?
Salim, you want to go first?
Yeah, let me go first, Shrikant.
Yeah.
So I think we were looking at it and we were contemplating that, we need to repurpose our thinking, both in terms of space as well as intervention. In terms of interventions with the startups, we are focusing on trying to create a stable and reliable revenue source for these startups. It could be through corporates or through directly doing the business development for them. On the infra part, we are really looking at the tech infrastructure part. We are really looking at not creating labs of yesterdays, but labs of tomorrow. The labs of tomorrow would be more technology based, more augmented reality, virtual reality based, wherein you could have labs with just a couple of goggles, etc. Somebody could learn how to do a high precision tooling, which could be useful for corporates like Bosch and others. It could be some intervention where somebody could help out tracing or build a solution on blockchain for property rights, etc. So these would be the labs of tomorrow's, and that is what our concentration would be. Regardless of what happens, we are going to go digital, both in decision making as well as on the infra part.
Thank you, Salim.
So,
what do you think?
Two areas where incubators can add value in completely different ways and new ways going forward. One is helping their startups become smarter and more frugal in the use of money, because money is going to be hard to come by. Government, which is a big source of money funds for the incubators, is going to be hard pressed. Startups in general will be competing with many others for money. So now let me give you two suggestions of what I've done at some of the incubators I've been involved with for smarter, more frugal use of money. One is, a lot of startups get to a stage, if they're in the product business, to say, now I need to manufacture because I have proved that my product has acceptance. Manufacturing sucks up a lot of capital in the fundraise. So in one case, we actually dissuaded the startup 2 months ago. Don't set up manufacturing. You don't have to go to China for your manufacturing. There are thousands of SMEs in India who are keeping a low profile, who have idle factories. They know how to manage the environment for running a factory. We actually got this startup tied up with 3 manufacturers. Both sets are happy. Manufacturer gets capacity utilization. The startup gets a product built out. That's one example. Frugal use of money. Similar use of money is in hiring, which is one of the team cost, manpower cost is one of the biggest heads where money gets sucked up. And what we did in this particular case was saying, you know what, you don't need to go and hire 30 something or 40 something who ask a lot of money, may not add value. We actually got them to hire 2 people who are in their late 50s and early 60s, just retiring, but they come with deep domain expertise. They're looking, and they will remain loyal, and they're looking for money, which is only pocket money post-retirement. You actually cut down your spend and got far more in-depth talent as a result. So these are 2 examples of ways in which incubators can train startups to use money smartly. The second thing incubators need to do to add value to their startups is, going forward, incubators need to incubate a lot more startups that create livelihoods. In the past, the focus has been, let's create startups that have a cool technology, but which is fundable by a VC 18 months down the line. Going forward, I think the country needs livelihoods. We need to incubate a lot more startups that create those livelihoods. And I'll give an example from a Will Grow Invent funded startup in IIM Calcutta called, it's a startup that has created artificial insemination for Black Bengal goats. 25 lakhs is all the investment till date, but they've created 1,000 micro entrepreneurs in West Bengal. Look at the ratio of investment to livelihoods created. We need a lot more of that. So one of the big filters in investment will have to be how many livelihoods can you create? Can you leverage technology in a way? Can you create a business model in a way where thousands of livelihoods would get created? That fundamental thinking change needs to happen at the incubator. It's good for the incubator, good for the country, good for the startups.
Yeah,
Thank you.
May I
Yes.
add to what Srikanth just said? I really do resonate with that. And I guess arising from the fact that a large number of women tend to go into social enterprises which focus on education, on livelihood, on community health, on environment, we see that a lot more of that will happen. And we also need to see a lot more of support organizations and investment going into that, because, well, today we are seeing those millions of migrants who have returned. They have no means of livelihood, and that's an immediate acute crisis. But then going forward in a country like ours, that needs to become a focus. Even where technology is concerned, leveraging technology for this purpose should be a very focused special area and area of interest for all stakeholders, whether it's government, whether it's investors. So that's something that we are working on because it ties in with our focus group of women.
Srini, can I just comment a little bit on this point as well?
Of
So,
course.
Srikanth, if you look at it, the easiest way to create jobs is to be in the services sector, right? And we shouldn't bet all our, or we shouldn't put all our eggs in that basket, because if you will also note that today, there is a certain amount of risk associated with the services sector. In fact, with the government's plan, where they are trying to create, capacity in manufacturing within the country, it might be that there might be a lot more opportunity also available for startups in the manufacturing sector as well. So I think, while I agree that creating livelihood is quite an important task at this time, I just feel that we should balance it out between what are the current immediate needs and also a little down the road, where we will need to also create competitive jobs which survive market forces as well, and at that time we will need to be competing with the rest of the world, right? So I just thought I'll add that comment. I think there's space for both. That's the thing that I wanted to say.
I'm just wondering if I look at how the pattern which is there. Clearly, of course, there is the need and the area to work in creating livelihoods going ahead. It potentially, from what I see also, of course, is either it is more specialized or has a specific domain area. It could be technology, or it could be specifically in creating higher order skills or building resilience. That seems to be both one, a potential high demand area, but also two, an area where an incubator could probably thrive, right? As we as incubators, where we can add maximum value, rather than being a generic incubator, so to speak. And I sense from what I picked up here, for us to be able to be successful, in a way, we have to pick our domain. We have to pick an area we're going to be really good at. It could be a technical area, or like Sucharita, you've been doing it. It's a little different when you're saying how do you drive diversity. It's a specific functional or a demographic, a skill that you want to focus on. But what is that you want to pick can become really deep and strong at. Because from there, I'm seeing as Dr. Premnath had described it. I think from there it flows. Even the funding networks, the ability to understand the business. I think even Salim alluded to tomorrow's labs, how Shrikant talked about helping companies pivot. It seems to be coming from that area of deep, specific expertise, and that's how value is going to get added. Right? And but while we do all this, I'm just wondering. This means we have to make hard choices, right? And how do you think an incubator can make those choices? As much as you can say yes to something, it also means you have to say no to something else. Have you, in your experience, said no to something? Say, no, this looks interesting, but not an area I want to do. Let me focus on what I am good at. Salim, you want to take a crack at that first? Have you ever said no? Salim?
Hey, Srini. Yeah, I think we've had this. We keep getting this request. We have a very competitive research and insights team, and the learnings that they bring out are very useful. So we keep getting this request that can you do a social impact audit? Can you help the service NGOs, etc., do fundraise, and things like that. But we've been saying no to these things. Our core competency is technology and startups. We look at what are the different sectors that we can add on and make this intersections between the technology and sectors. These intersection points much larger. I mean, probably today we're working at 20 intersections of different sectors and technologies. We'd like to take this to 40 or 60, etc., rather than get caught in something which is more of a specialization for somebody else rather than a tech business incubator.
Makes sense. Shrikant, have you ever said no to something? Shrikant, you're on mute.
Mute.
Okay, while Shrikant comes back from mute, Dr. Premnath is,
yeah, so clearly we have been one of the things which we have been careful about is what drains a lot of our team's time and is not sometimes there is a temptation to do all of those also because every incubator is trying to manage its resources in creative ways. And there's also this pressure to diversify the sources of revenue and inflows. So there's, as Salil said, there is a temptation to go down I'll just call it the consulting services route, right? There is also the temptation to look at a few things which really cost a lot of time. For example, we took a call at some point when we were looking at things like technology transfer, where we decided that we would not do it with our own internal resources. Okay, we would rather do it if we could bring in focused money to make that happen, because invariably working with a lot of the technology providers drains a lot of our time and HR resources. For many incubators, it may not be a good idea to invest in dedicated scientific facilities which basically are underutilized. So I think there needs to be a way, because it basically drains money, recurring resources over a period of time if you have carelessly invested in a lot of capex, which sometimes when you are tempted to do because the government gives you a grant, to do that.
Right.
So I think those are things which one has to be careful about. But that said, typical science and engineering kind of startup does need physical and scientific facilities, and you cannot run away from that. And it is not always possible to arrange it through other sources. So I think there's a fine balance there, and one has to constantly be on the lookout for how it's going to impact your, your recurring costs over a period of time, and how you will manage your resources. So there are many things we have done in that direction where you have had to choose, and that choice also depends on the kind of incubator you are. A for-profit incubator might have a different way of looking at it. A social enterprise incubator that doesn't focus as much on science and engineering may have a different way of looking at it. One that is associated with a scientific institution may have a different way of looking at it. So I think one needs, there's no general formula one can offer there, except, all the wisdom that incubators share with their incubatees, they need to apply to themselves also.
Got it. I also sense that we're coming to, toward the end of our time. We probably can extend by 5 odd minutes. Yeah. But what I want to at this point do is sort of summarize. And there's been a whole bunch of questions that my team has been picking up some of the more interesting ones, which I want to ask, right? And any of you could decide to choose it. But before I get to the Q&A, just to sort of summarize for all the folks who are listening in, broadly, it looks like it is not doom and gloom. There is optimism, while it is uncertainty, but there is, of course, there is a certain amount of caution, but clearly it's optimistic. But clearly one of the things which drives that optimism is that ability to define what that the incubator's strength is. What is that knowledge that they are really clear about? Sectoral or domain knowledge, specific business support, the ability to advise a startup to be able to pivot, understand their business, and also very key, networks. And so for anyone listening, I think these are the 4-5 key areas you're going to be building more of your strength on to be able to make a difference among social enterprises, right? And 3 areas that people said will have a lot of focus going ahead. One is, of course, technology, both in digital infrastructure and maybe decision making. So the lab for tomorrow is something that's coming up. Second area is how our enterprise is going to create more livelihoods, sustainable livelihoods, which can, or maybe even resilient livelihoods. The third is, I know there's a bit of diverging view on the question about manufacturing and capability, but I think that seems to be another area which we have to look at. And this, a lot of the manufacturing will be completely domestic, made in India kind of manufacturing. So 3 areas we think has high potential. What I want to do is actually start a bunch of questions, some very interesting ones which have come up. The first one, and the way I want to run it, is let me ask the question, and amongst the panelists, you could volunteer to answer it. The first is, should incubators allow some incubatees to fail and support only those who are better poised post-COVID?
Well, this is a principle that should be followed at all times and not just post-COVID, because I think there has to be a time window within which you figure out whether or not the invention they have or the product they have or service they have has acceptance in the market, whether it has a good business model. You can't keep them on perennial life support. So I'm a firm advocate of a closed-ended incubation and not continuously open-ended incubation. And COVID makes it even more necessary for us to do that.
Interesting. Any other views?
We actually have where we push our entities out if they're not really, kind of pushing themselves to kind of make progress on a month-on-month, quarter-on-quarter. Right? If they're just kind of looking at this as a lifestyle option, or if they don't want to change their status quo, they're kind of looking to be just these small enterprises, not kind of looking to kind of build that innovation out to scale, then there's not much of a role for us, right? Like, we can be used as a conduit for access to some capital, some prize, some recognition, but that's not what our job is, right? Our job is basically to help these guys commercialize and scale their innovation. So I think failure is absolutely part of that equation.
So what you're saying, as we call inside Wilgrow, is tough love.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyone else want to respond, or I'll move to the next question?
All I want to say is entrepreneurship entails and symbolizes risk-taking. So if incubators are not willing to take a risk to enable some to fail, then maybe we are just playing too safe. That's the
like
reality
unanimity in this.
in the startup world, right? Or in the business world.
Thank you. I'm moving to the next question. In this post-COVID era, will there be more opportunities for stitching together partnerships to build or leverage on innovation muscle or expertise of social enterprises, or even CSR mandates of communities? How could platforms or incubators like yourselves enable this?
So this actually has to go beyond across incubators, and I'll give you two examples of what informally I saw recently. There is this startup in Ladakh called Ladakh Local. They want to create an e-commerce for art and craft from Ladakh, and they wanted to start from scratch. I said, don't do that. There's something similar happening in Northeast called Brahmaputra Fables. I said, learn from them, use their technology backend, learn from their expertise rather than reinvent something from scratch. Likewise, if there are 3 startups all operating in a rural area, one in rural education, another in rural healthcare, another rural livelihood, please share infrastructure in that location. There isn't enough money to go around. Now, the problem is this is dependent on informal spotting of such opportunities. We need a platform that cuts across incubators to say who can partner, which startup from Ahmedabad can partner with which startup in Pune, with which one in Calcutta. So you need a platform that makes it very easy to find each other, actually.
That's a very intriguing thought. I know, Shrikant, you're going to leave in a couple of minutes. But does anyone want to add to what Shrikant just said about...
Yeah, we are working on creating a virtual incubation model. As I said in the beginning, the physical space and all that is not what most women entrepreneurs are looking for. So that is what we are doing, and we are reaching out to tier 2 and tier 3 cities to do this. And we clearly see that collaboration is extremely important and necessary, and particularly in these times. Firstly, as came up earlier, for testing and infrastructure kind of facilities, you need not recreate them in every tech incubator. So we, for example, have tie-ups with the NASSCOM Startup Warehouse and IISC, Indian Institute of Science. So we'd really like to see a lot more of that kind of collaboration happening. So in terms of connects, resources, what Shrikant mentioned, I think there's a lot that we can work on as incubators and enablers for access to markets, for vendors, for service providers, benefits, mentors, different models which may be useful for different groups that we work with. So I see collaboration as a big way to go. And also what we are doing is that we are not focusing only on startups. We are also looking at existing entrepreneurs who want to reach the next level of growth. And how do we work with them on that? And I think that's an important segment that we need to be working with. And of course, whether that's a call for incubators to see whether it's relevant to them or not, but that is something that we are doing. Yeah, as I mentioned about investors, and I think we heard that from several people among the panelists, that investors need to be having a different kind of perspective when it comes to looking at investing, not just fast growth and fast exit, but also impact, also longer term continuity. These two factors, I'm sure that they will be bringing in.
Srinivas,
Yes.
yeah, to add to what Suchrita and Srikanth was saying, I mean, it's essential not just the incubators, but overall multiple, many more actors to come together. Essentially, looking at amplifying the network capital and creating powerful stories out of some of these tech solutions for social change. Also, look at making accessible meeting spaces and accessible voice for like the example of the artisans and Ladakh, etc. I think essentially it should give voice to the people and the data that can be accessed by entrepreneurs to develop a better solutions. I think the biggest problem will be how do we get field experience into the product development, and if this accessible meeting spaces, etc., can help that, we could have better products coming out to take it to the market.
It's quite interesting, and I know it's not in the scope of our conversation today, but what each of you have said, particularly on this question, is an opportunity, and I think that's something that I'll take up. We'll talk outside this, but the potential for pooling resources, either a network, a network of mentors, like which happened in the Invent program, or even the ability to access each other's any specific, technical support that they offer, like a venture center versus I am Calcutta, very different things, right? Or a will grow. It'll be very interesting to see how that can get built, and I'll speak with you outside this on that. Anyone else wants to add to it, or I want to go to the next question, which is quite maybe specific to Sucharita, but Karthik, do you want to add anything?
On the partnership piece, I think,
yes.
We see that, we were seeing that earlier as something critical to us from a learning perspective, right? What I talked about in terms of us jumping into spaces which we are learning about, where we want to kind of go out and build that out, or kind of see that happen in India. So we go out and kind of reach out for expertise and kind of build that understanding, and then bring them in to kind of help our startups, right? But we've been doing that for knowledge, but I think now going forward, we need to do that for infrastructure. We need to do that for a lot more things, right? I think that I don't think we have done enough of, but I think we're going to start doing that. But to that extent, I think I got to be very glad about, we have a WhatsApp group for all the Atal Innovation Incubation Centers, right? And that's a pretty active group of 80 plus incubators across the country. And so you're amazed by all the different things that are happening and learning from that as well. So I think it's a great opportunity if you can kind of bring people in informal groups first, and then see things coalesce. And it's also great to see when people in informal groups start contributing to the overall group without any kind of prodding or requirement. Right? So I think that might be a good place to start.
Just a couple of suggestions, a couple of points here to add. One is that since there are many other incubators on this event today, of course, there is a need to share physical and scientific resources, but a few things which one should look out for, in my opinion, is in the current situation, I think incubators need to explore as many opportunities to get in-kind access to resources of different kinds, okay? So for example, many AICs might be associated with host institutions, and host institutions are much larger organizations which can extend more in-kind resources to incubators, and I think they should do that. Another area of cooperation, I think, which many incubators need to explore, and we think it's important, is fundraising itself for the incubator. And I think we don't do enough of collaborative proposal writing in the incubation space. At least that's my impression. I haven't seen as much, and it is important to leverage each other's strengths and explore how one can get more results out of a given set of resources. I think that is going to be important as well in the coming few months. So I think people will need to look at that, especially given the fact that there's a lot of attention of the charities, corporates, grant-giving agencies, government agencies will be directed towards multiple other priorities. And it will be important to present a strong enough case for why incubation is an important investment to make under such circumstances today.
Right. I think what you brought up is super important. It's there, been in the background, about why would someone want to support an incubator? You're right. I don't think I've seen too many examples of incubators coming together to run a program as partners. But I have seen, in fact, I'm also responding live to a question here, but I have seen collaborations in the other areas happen, which is sharing mentors, sharing investors, follow-on funders, to some degree, even resources, technical resources. But at one point that you did bring up, I've yet to see some movement, which is two incubators coming together and saying, hey, we complement each other. So why don't we put a united front to say we can create impact at a much larger scale? I think that's a very intriguing thought, and I'm just hoping some of us here could work together outside this. So that and the platform are two things that I'm going to talk to you later. But I'm just going to quickly go to the next question. Anyone can take this. What would you classify as the top 3 challenges women entrepreneurs need to overcome, specifically in the post-COVID reality?
Well, the first thing is they need to break out of their traditional cultural barriers, and that the centuries of conditioning has not helped, and so that is something which even tech entrepreneurs, we find that they are still limited by the traditional roles which they think they have to play and which are important to them. So that is the first thing that I would say they would need to work on. The second thing is that, and as part of that leads to the second thing, is that a lot of them feel that it's either business and entrepreneurship or family. And the messaging that we are giving them is that it doesn't necessarily mean that it's either this or that, but there could be a system that you develop that takes care of both areas. And that leads to the third thing, and which in our experience we see that which prevents many entrepreneurs from growing. I mentioned that earlier about them, assisting them to grow. It stops them from what I call thinking big, and they tend to stay local, do not grow, and they are doing some highly innovative work and amazing innovations, but because of these barriers, they do not think of growing and thinking big. So those are the 3 specific to women that I would talk about here.
So this is the very last question because we've almost run out of time. And anyone please can answer. Are there any special trainings required for capacity development provider, incubators included, to be able to continue support for portfolios in the most effective manner?
I'm sorry, Srinivas, your question was training for whom?
Training for the incubators itself.
Incubators. Yep. I think we should start with Zoom.
Oh, that is a really, I think that's a good observation, yes.
No,
Some of the ideas that came out here really would lead into, orientation to pivot, to do things differently, to collaborate. I think many of the ideas coming out here would lead to that, in my view.
I think a few points here. One of my observations is that several incubators have not tried to carefully diversify their sources of revenue and income. Okay, and I think that is going to be a concern for many incubators. So I think it is important that incubators and incubation managers uh, learn to create those options and alternative inflows from different sources, and to optimize according to their own kind of incubation that they are pursuing. And this is something which I think requires some training. There is no real formal training in India for incubation managers, to my knowledge. Okay, but even worse, there isn't as much training for not-for-profits in India. I think so, right? At the level that it should be in terms of not-for-profit management. So I think these are those are areas where I think this is an opportunity for us to create a professional group of incubator managers who just didn't get into there coincidentally, but also came into it with intention and professional interest.
Oh, okay, that's a powerful thought, because I think I'm going to take you up on this, along with collaboration and Karthik's suggestion of an informal network to start with. We potentially together can join hands and become a much larger force post-COVID. I see that as a big positive step forward. We are in the last minute, so is there any last observation that anyone has? Any points? Anything to take away? Great. Thank you, Dr. Premnath. Thank you, Sucharita, Karthik, Salim, and Shrikant. It was fabulous having you. I know we had a big agenda, a lot to talk about, but I hope I think we've come to some kind of a direction, some pointers which have come out. In fact, I have picked up something, and I think at Willgrow we're going to be doing some work on it, and I'm going to come back to you. And maybe we should, if there's any important point the participants have raised, I'll be happy to share that with you and do some kind of an offline discussion. It was fantastic having all of you here. Thank you. Stay safe and enjoy the weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Srinivas. Thank you, everyone. Bye.